When you hear the word apocalypse, what comes to mind? Perhaps images of cities crumbling, the sky turning dark, or the earth splitting open beneath our feet. Maybe you think of Hollywood blockbusters, with their dramatic special effects and heroic survivors fighting against impossible odds. But what if everything we've been told about the apocalypse is only half the story? What if the truth is far stranger, more nuanced, and perhaps even more terrifying than we've been led to believe? Let's take a journey together into the heart of what the apocalypse really means, stripping away the layers of misconception, fear-mongering, and sensationalism that have built up over centuries. This is the uncensored version, the truth that often gets buried beneath religious dogma, Hollywood dramatization, and cultural mythology. What apocalypse actually means? Let's start with a revelation of our own. The word apocalypse doesn't actually mean the end of the world. Shocking, isn't it? The term comes from the ancient Greek word apokalypsis, which simply means uncovering or revelation. It refers to the disclosure of knowledge or truth that was previously hidden. Over time, however, the word became synonymous with catastrophic destruction, largely due to its association with the biblical book of Revelation, also known as the Apocalypse of John. This linguistic shift is important because it reveals how our understanding of apocalyptic events has been shaped more by cultural interpretation than by the original meaning of the word itself. When ancient texts spoke of apocalypse, they were often referring to a moment of profound truth-telling, a cosmic unveiling where the hidden nature of reality would be exposed. Yes, this revelation might involve dramatic events, but the destruction was never the point. The revelation was the many faces of apocalypse throughout human history. Nearly every culture has had its own version of end-times prophecy. The Norse had Ragnarok, a great battle that would destroy the gods themselves and plunge the world into chaos before its eventual rebirth. The ancient Mayans tracked vast cycles of creation and destruction in their long count calendar. Hindus speak of the Kali Yuga, an age of darkness and moral decline that precedes cosmic renewal. Even ancient Egyptians believed in cycles of creation, destruction, and recreation governed by their gods. What's fascinating is that these apocalyptic visions, despite originating from vastly different cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, share remarkable similarities. Almost all of them involve a period of great tribulation, the destruction of the old order, and the emergence of something new. Many include cosmic signs, strange occurrences in the heavens, unusual animal behavior, natural disasters, and the collapse of social structures. But here's what they don't tell you in Sunday school or in documentary specials. These apocalyptic prophecies were never really about predicting a specific date when the world would end. They were sophisticated metaphors for understanding the cyclical nature of existence itself. They were attempts by ancient peoples to make sense of the inevitable changes that all civilizations, all systems, and all living things must undergo. The scientific apocalypse. Now, let's shift gears and look at what science tells us about potential apocalyptic scenarios. And here's where things get really interesting and, perhaps, a bit uncomfortable. Scientists have identified numerous extinction-level threats that humanity faces. And unlike ancient prophecies, these come with statistical probabilities and measurable risks. There's the ever-present danger of asteroid impacts. A rock just 6 miles wide ended the reign of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, and similar objects continue to hurtle through space, occasionally passing uncomfortably close to Earth. Then there are supervolcanic eruptions. Beneath Yellowstone National Park sits a massive chamber of molten rock that, if it were to erupt, could plunge the northern hemisphere into a volcanic winter lasting years. The last time a supervolcano of this magnitude erupted, the Toba eruption, about 75,000 years ago, it nearly wiped out the entire human species, reducing our population to perhaps as few as 10,000 individuals. Climate change presents a slower but potentially just as devastating scenario. Rising temperatures, extreme weather events, ocean acidification, and ecosystem collapse could create a world radically different from the one we know, potentially triggering mass migration, resource wars, and the breakdown of global systems that currently sustain billions of people. And then there are the threats we've created ourselves: nuclear weapons capable of destroying civilization many times over, artificial intelligence that might one day surpass human control, biotechnology that could unleash engineered pandemics, and even the seemingly mundane threat of antibiotic-resistant bacteria that could return us to a pre-modern medical era. But here's the uncensored truth that scientists often hesitate to emphasize. We've been living under these threats for decades, and yet we continue. Life persists. Humanity adapts. The apocalypse, in the sense of complete and total annihilation, is far less likely than we've been conditioned to believe. The psychological apocalypse, perhaps the most overlooked aspect of apocalyptic thinking, is what it reveals about human psychology. Why are we so fascinated by our own potential destruction? Why do apocalyptic movies, books, and video games dominate our entertainment industry? Why does every generation seem to believe they're living in the end times? Psychologists have identified something called apocalypse anxiety, a deep-seated fear that the world as we know it will come to an end. This anxiety serves several psychological functions. First, it gives meaning to suffering. If we're living through the tribulation before the end, then our hardships have cosmic significance. Second, it provides a sense of being special. Every generation wants to believe they're living through history's most important moment. Third, it offers the paradoxical comfort of certainty in an uncertain world. If we know the world is ending, we don't have to worry about the mundane anxieties of daily life. But here's what nobody tells you. This apocalyptic thinking can actually prevent us from addressing real problems. When we convince ourselves that the end is inevitable and imminent, we lose motivation to work toward long-term solutions. Why fight climate change if Jesus is returning next year? Why invest in renewable energy if the Antichrist is about to take over? Why save for retirement if civilization will collapse before we need those savings? This is the uncensored truth. Apocalyptic thinking can be a form of escapism, a way to avoid the hard, unglamorous work of making gradual improvements to our world. It's more exciting to imagine ourselves as survivors in a post-apocalyptic wasteland than to acknowledge we're ordinary people facing ordinary challenges that require sustained, boring effort to overcome the social apocalypse every day. Somewhere in the world, someone is experiencing their personal apocalypse. A cancer diagnosis, a natural disaster that destroys their home, the loss of a loved one, economic collapse that wipes out their life savings. For that individual, their world has truly ended, and they must find a way to survive in the aftermath. This is another uncensored truth. The apocalypse isn't a singular future event, it's happening all the time, just on individual and community scales rather than global ones. The Syrian refugee who watched their city destroyed by war, the Pacific Islander watching their homeland disappear beneath rising seas, the American factory worker whose entire industry vanished, taking their livelihood with it. These are apocalyptic events, complete with the trauma, displacement, and need for rebuilding that we associate with end times scenarios. Yet life continues. Humans are remarkably resilient. We rebuild, we adapt, we find meaning in the aftermath. This resilience is perhaps the most important truth about apocalypse that rarely gets emphasized. Endings are also beginnings. What dies makes room for what's born. The technological apocalypse and transcendence in recent decades. A new form of apocalyptic thinking has emerged from Silicon Valley and futurist circles. Some technologists predict a singularity, a point at which artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence, leading to changes so rapid and profound that life as we know it becomes unrecognizable. This is apocalypse reimagined for the digital age. But here's the uncensored part. Many of these technological prophets aren't afraid of this apocalypse, they're eagerly anticipating it. They see the destruction of the current human condition as necessary for our evolution into something greater. Whether that's merging with machines, uploading our consciousness to computers, or being superseded by our artificial creations. This reveals something crucial about apocalyptic thinking. It's not always about fear. Sometimes it's about hope. The apocalypse represents radical transformation. And for those dissatisfied with the current state of things, transformation, even violent, disruptive transformation, can seem appealing. The economic apocalypse. Let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention in apocalyptic discourse: economic systems. Throughout history, economic collapses have caused more immediate suffering than most natural disasters. The Great Depression, the 2008 financial crisis, the hyperinflation in Weimar Germany, these were apocalyptic events for millions of people. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Our current global economic system is built on assumptions that may not hold in the long term. Infinite growth on a finite planet, complex supply chains vulnerable to disruption, massive wealth inequality, debt levels that can never realistically be repaid. Many economists privately worry that we're not experiencing normal economic cycles anymore, but rather the long, slow unraveling of an unsustainable system. This economic apocalypse wouldn't necessarily come with fire and brimstone. It might look like Japan's lost decades of stagnation, or Venezuela's collapse into dysfunction. It might be gradual erosion rather than sudden catastrophe, but for those living through it, the effects would be just as devastating as any biblical plague. The uncensored truth about survival. Now let's address what might be the biggest lie in apocalyptic thinking: the myth of the prepared survivor. Popular culture is filled with images of rugged individualists who, through preparation, strength, and cunning, survive the apocalypse while others perish. This fantasy fuels a multi-billion-dollar survival industry selling everything from bunkers to freeze-dried food to tactical gear. Here's the harsh reality. If a true civilization-ending catastrophe occurred, almost no amount of individual preparation would save you. The things that actually ensure survival are community, cooperation, knowledge sharing, and the ability to work together. The lone wolf survivalist is actually less likely to survive than the person embedded in a strong social network with diverse skills and mutual support. Moreover, survival itself isn't necessarily the goal we should be fixating on. Quality of life matters. Community matters. Meaning and purpose matter. Surviving in a bunker for years while civilization collapses above you, is that really living? Or is it just a different kind of death? The climate reality check. Let's be direct about climate change, because the discourse around it has become so politicized and apocalyptic that the actual science gets lost. Yes, climate change is real. Yes, it's caused primarily by human activity. Yes, it will create serious challenges for civilization. But no, it's not going to make Earth uninhabitable for humans in the next decade, or even the next century. The apocalyptic rhetoric around climate change, while well-intentioned, may actually be counterproductive. It creates a sense of helplessness and inevitability that can lead to paralysis rather than action. The uncensored truth is more nuanced. Climate change will create a different world, one with more extreme weather, shifting agricultural zones, mass migration, and ecosystem changes. It will require massive adaptation. Some places will become less habitable, while others become more so. Species will go extinct, but new ecosystems will emerge. Humanity will face serious challenges, but we're unlikely to face extinction. This isn't minimizing the problem, it's putting it in realistic terms. The apocalypse isn't a binary event where one day everything is fine and the next day everything is destroyed. It's a process of change that's already underway, and our response to it matters far more than our ability to predict exactly when some threshold will be crossed. The spiritual apocalypse for billions of people worldwide. Apocalyptic thinking is deeply tied to religious belief. The Book of Revelation, Islamic-esque, Hindu prophecies of Kalki, Buddhist predictions about Maitreya. These aren't just ancient texts. They're living beliefs that shape how people understand their place in cosmic history. Here's what often goes unsaid. These religious apocalypses are primarily about justice and transformation, not destruction. They promise that the wicked will be punished, the righteous rewarded, and a new, better world will emerge. They're expressions of hope that the current order, with all its injustices and suffering, is not permanent. The uncensored truth is that apocalyptic religion has always been the religion of the oppressed. It emerges when people feel powerless to change their circumstances through ordinary means, so they appeal to cosmic intervention. The early Christians who wrote and cherished the Book of Revelation were a persecuted minority in the Roman Empire. The apocalyptic movements throughout history have typically emerged among people facing severe hardship. This doesn't make these beliefs less real to those who hold them, but it does help us understand their social and psychological function. The apocalypse represents divine justice when human justice seems impossible. The choice we face. So, what's the real truth about apocalypse? Stripped of all the censorship, all the dramatization, all the wishful thinking and fearful projection, the truth is this: apocalypse, in the sense of radical transformation and revelation, is not only possible but inevitable. Change is the only constant. The world we know will end, just as countless worlds before it have ended. But this ending is not the same as extinction or annihilation. It's transformation. We face real challenges: climate change, nuclear proliferation, pandemic diseases, artificial intelligence, economic instability, and more. These aren't fictional threats, they're actual problems, requiring serious attention and coordinated response. But they're not destiny. They're challenges, and challenges can be met. The apocalypse we should actually fear is not a dramatic event, but a gradual decline into dysfunction. Societies that become too corrupt to function, too divided to cooperate, too focused on short-term gains to plan for long-term survival. This is the boring apocalypse. The one that happens so slowly we don't notice until it's too late to easily reverse. Conversely, the apocalypse we should hope for is the one the word originally meant: revelation, the uncovering of truth, the moment when we see clearly what needs to change and find the collective will to change it. This apocalypse is happening right now, in movements around the world demanding social justice, environmental protection, and human dignity. It's happening in scientific laboratories, in artistic expressions, in conversations between people willing to challenge their assumptions. Conclusion: living with apocalypse. The uncensored truth about apocalypse is that we're always living in it. Every moment contains both ending and beginning, death and birth, destruction and creation. The caterpillar's world ends when it enters the chrysalis, but the butterfly's begins when it emerges. The question isn't whether apocalypse will commit, what we'll do with the revelations it brings. We don't need to live in constant fear of the end, but we also can't afford complacency. We don't need to retreat into bunkers or religious fanaticism, but we do need to take seriously the challenges facing our civilization. We don't need to despair about humanity's future, but we do need to work actively to shape that future in positive ways. The greatest lie about apocalypse is that it's something that happens to us, something we're powerless to prevent or shape. The greatest truth is that we're participants in an ongoing process of transformation, and our choices matter. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every effort to understand rather than judge, every attempt to build rather than destroy. These are acts of resistance against the destructive apocalypse and contributions to the revelatory one. So yes, the world as we know it will end. It ends a little bit every day, and every day, a new world is born. The question is, what world are you helping to create? If you found this deep dive into the uncensored truth about apocalypse thought, please follow our channel for more content that challenges conventional thinking and explores the hidden truths beneath the surface of popular narratives. Like this video if it gave you a new perspective, and share it with friends who aren't afraid to question everything they've been told. The apocalypse may be a revelation, and the first revelation